Hi, how you doing? Good, I hope. I've been really studying corporations a lot these days. And I was shocked to find out that I had went to business school for a while and studied on that, on business, and just learned the tip of the iceberg on the subject of corporations. And details are the keys to open up the way to go in to study more and find out the truth. Because a lot of them's keeping secrets. And they say it's just to protect their assets, which is more than just a product. And their products are questionable too. So, I've been reading this book and over, and I've got to take it back soon, but The 15 Biggest Lies About the Economy by Joshua Holland, and everything else the right doesn't want you to know about taxes, jobs, and corporate America. He is such a good writer. I mean, this book is chock full of details. I urge all Americans that is concerned about our nation to read this, because these corporations are enemies to our democracy. And he spoke of Thom Hartmann, who I watch a lot. He's a very good newsman too. And indeed, I have such a high admiration for them. I would urge Thom Hartmann and Joshua Holland to go into public office in our federal government if they ever would do something like that, because they would be the kind of men I would trust in that office. Now, in this one section that really caught my attention was on these corporations. Corporate personhood gives businesses entirely artificial entities created by the state the same individual rights that the framers fought and died to secure for flesh and blood citizens, or at least for white male property holders, but you get the idea. The doctrine's origin in English law was reasonable enough. It was only by considering companies persons that they could be taken to court and sued, and you can't sue an inanimate object. During the 19th century, however, the robber barons, aided by a few corrupt jurists deep in their pockets, took the concept to a whole new level in the United States. According to legal textbooks, the idea that corporations enjoy the same constitutional rights as you or I was codified in the 1886 decision Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. But historian Thom Hartmann dug into the original case documents and found that this crucially important legal doctrine actually originated with what may be the most significant act of corruption in history. It occurred during a seemingly routine tax case. Santa Clara sued the Southern Pacific Railroad to pay property taxes on the land it held in the county, and the railroad claimed that because states had different rates, allowing them to tax its holdings would violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And in my words, you need to realize that different states have different rules for corporations. The railroads had made the claim in previous cases, but the courts had never brought the argument. In a 2005 interview, Hartmann described his surprise when he went to a Vermont courthouse to read an original copy of the verdict and found that the judges had made no mention of corporate personhood. In fact, he told the interviewer the decision says at its end that because they could find a California state law that covered the case, it is not necessary to consider any other question, such as the constitutionality of the railroad's claim to personhood. Hartmann then explained how it was that corporations actually became people. But in the head note to the case, a commentary written by the clerk, which is not legally binding. It is just a commentary to help out law students and whatnot. Summarizing the case, the court's clerk wrote, "The defendant corporations are persons within the intent of the clause in Section 1 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which forbids a state to deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The discovery that we had been operating for over 100 years on an incorrect head note led Hartmann to look into the past of the clerk who'd written it, J.C. Bancroft Davis. He discovered that Davis had been a corrupt official who had himself previously served as the president of a railroad. Digging deeper, Hartmann then discovered that Davis had been working in collusion with another corrupt Supreme Court justice, Stephen Field. The railroad companies, according to Hartmann, had promised Field that they'd sponsor his run for the White House if he assisted them in their effort to gain constitutional rights. Hartmann noted that even after the ruling, the idea of corporate personhood remained relatively obscure until corporate lawyers dusted off the doctrine during the Reagan era and used it to help reshape the U.S. political economy. Nike asserted before the Supreme Court, as Sinclair Broadcasting did in a press release last month, that these corporations have First Amendment rights of free speech. Dow Chemical, in a case it took to the Supreme Court, asserted it has Fourth Amendment privacy rights and could refuse to allow the EPA to do surprise inspections of its facilities. J.C. Penney asserted before the Supreme Court that it had a 14th Amendment right to be free from discrimination. The 14th Amendment was passed to free the slaves after the Civil War, and that communities that were trying to keep out chain stores were practicing illegal discrimination. Tobacco and asbestos companies asserted that they had Fifth Amendment rights to keep secret what they knew about the dangers of their products. With the exception of the Nike case, all of these attempts to obtain human rights for corporations were successful. And now they wield this huge club against government that was meant to protect relatively helpless and fragile human beings. And indeed, if corporations had human rights, then they are worthy of execution of death for murder, which Dow Company, even by himself, has so many victims that he has murdered with his poisons that it's ludicrous to even think this. And to get away with murder that easily, then this is more of a godlike right that is really against anything the big God is for. And in their paperworks, everything's complicated, especially the bigger they are, the more paperwork you'd have to go through just to learn anything about them. And that's how crooks have always covered up their crimes, is to make things so complicated. Even our smartest people have a hard time going through and understanding what these papers are saying. And they had a lot of secrets in that complication. And history, I'm still studying. Looking back into some history about this. And it helps lead people to the answers of questions about such an object, which is pretty bad. And we need some justice in America today. Well, I'm going back to study. Y'all have a good one wherever you are, day or night. Later.